Give us an idea, like what would it cost to like maintain your race team for a year?
I think it depends on how much you race, but races can be anywhere from, on the cheap end for local race, like 10,000 a race, to as much as 50 or 60,000 a race, depending on where you're going. Yeah.
So if you get sponsors
hotels,
and things
food,
like that, then it can offset those costs?
Yeah, it can offset the cost. It just kind of depends on how much support you get. Like the biggest factory drivers obviously get the most support, but even for the big factory drivers, they're still being subsidized, because when you're running at that competitive of a program, you're spending even more money. Yeah. So I would say most drivers have actually been entrepreneurs or are the family of, really successful entrepreneurs at some point. So it's kind of fun.
Chad Ingram, good to have you on the show. I want to start out by just asking you, what's the one thing in life you care most about?
The one thing in life I care most about, I would say, it's really two answers tied together, but freedom with my family. It's actually funny. I was going through my notebook that I guess I've had for like a year and a half, because I was looking for an old list just yesterday. And every once in a while, like I'll have like all my business notes, and then like for 50 pages or whatever, then every once in a while I'll put like a journal entry, just because I have my book and I've got a thought. And I actually had a thought the other day, or like I read the other day, yesterday, a thought I had about a year ago. And I wrote down that very question, actually. I wrote down, what is it that I value the most? Or essentially, why do I do what I do? Yeah. And that was the answer. So it's funny.
And freedom with my family.
Yeah.
I felt inspired to ask you that. Like, it sounds like a cliche question. I don't ask this to every guest. This is like, I just felt like you had something to share around that. So that's cool. Most founders don't have that sort of perspective, right? They claim they do, but like, how did you get to that place where those are the most important things for you?
So my dad was a small business owner. And he was a caterer in Southern California for like 40 years or something, like 35, 40 years, something like that. And I remember him teaching me, like I remember the exact words of him telling me when I was a teenager working for him. And he said, son, I would work for little to no money as long as I had my freedom. So we do what we do, for the freedom to create, the freedom of schedule, the freedom of your life. Not just for the money. The money is the outcome, right? Like that's kind of a measure of some success, I guess, or part of what success might look like. But for me, that's what it is. It's freedom. It's the ability to do what I feel compelled to do every day.
I was having a conversation with a friend recently who is also, in the last couple of years, he started a boutique investment bank. Mm-hmm. Actually, we met this morning for breakfast, and we had this conversation. We used to both be in sales in the same software company like 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And I remember talking about like the difference between being in a corporate cog and running your own company. Specifically, once you have had a little bit of success, you have a little bit more financial freedom. And it's like, knowing what we know now, I would never go back, because you tend to lose a lot of your freedom. For people that are in a corporate company, not everybody's going to be a founder. Not everybody's going to start a company. How do they find freedom? Any idea?
Like, how did the corporate cog find freedom? How do they?
Yeah.
I don't think they do. That's the problem. I think I really don't. I think in life that we make trade-offs, right? Like, but at the end of the day, you report to somebody, and at the end of the day, you have certain fears that you otherwise wouldn't have. Now, as an entrepreneur, we have fears too, right? Like customer cancellations, market shifts, burn, investors, boards, like all those things. But it's a different sense, because of, like the implications are different because of the sense of freedom that we have. But I do think there's a way around it, though. I think that those, and that maybe this is a little skewed because of my experience, but I think that those who choose, instead of working 9 to 5 at a corporation, they can work 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 p.m., whatever you choose, working for a startup. Yeah. A startup's a little bit different. A startup, there's ownership to go around, right? When you have a team of people that you know intimately, and you're motivated and driven by one aligned goal, it's very different, regardless of whether you're a shareholder or not. You know, I think that's maybe the exception, is where you can have people really start to participate, not just on like an equity side, but like really participate in the mission, you know, and what you're trying to do together. But I really don't see that in a large corporation headquartered in New York. I just don't see that.
So maybe they can achieve freedom, but maybe there's other things they can achieve, like balance and purpose. Like, you think that's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whatever it is that we do is a means to an end, right? Like, you know, there are certainly people that enjoy working in more of a corporate environment. Like, they need at least part of their life to be scheduled for them, right? Or to be decided for them. And in that lane, they can, you know, figure out what is a win for them. And that's okay. You know, somebody needs to be an accountant at a large company, right? Somebody needs to do that role, you know, but are you going to feel a lot of freedom and fulfillment about creation? Probably not. You're
a multiple time founder, have had a very successful exit in the past, but you're also a racer. And I care more about racing than I do building companies. So I want to talk about that. What kind of racing are you doing?
So I do off-road desert racing, which is endurance racing. So it's a format of, you know, short races are 4 hours long. Some of the longer races can be anywhere from 12 hours to 24 hours continuous. Only stopping, you know, every 200 miles or so for fuel, and the stop for fuel is like 30 seconds or something. So, you know, again, endurance racing, it's really challenging. So I compete in off-road in a UTV class called UTV Pro Turbo. And then I compete in, Best in the Desert, which is the US based series, the largest one there. And then also race for a local series called Bonneville Off-Road Racing. And then this year we're also competing in Legacy Racing Series. So pretty crazy.
When you say we're, like, there's
our team.
You have a whole team?
Yeah, so I have a couple of people that navigate. So when I drive, I have a co-driver with me, and so they help navigate, communicate with the pits over the radios, because we'll be 40 miles away from you know, our pit locations. So all that's done over the radio. They'll control the lighting in the car, all of the fans, temperatures, gauges, things like that while I drive. And so it's cool. It's a team effort. And then we have maybe 20 people that will volunteer in and out depending on their schedules, because it's pretty intensive. Like, logistically, these races are pretty intense.
Really? How so?
Yeah. So with these races, the car just absolutely gets destroyed. Like, you can imagine going through the desert, going 80 miles an hour, up to 100 plus miles an hour for that long. And so it takes a lot of people to make things move very quickly. And what happens with these races, you know, some races are loop races, more like a road track, like somebody might realize, where you start at one point and you finish at the same point and you go around and do multiple laps. So some of those races are there, and it'll be like, you know, 4 laps of 50 miles each. So they're really big laps. But some races are called point to point races, which means you race from one point and you end at a totally different location. Yep. In the US, the biggest point to point race is called Vegas to Reno. And some people have heard of it. But if you're at all in the off-road space, you would have heard of it. But you basically race you start outside of Vegas, and we drive through the day and through the night and end in Reno, Nevada. So across the state of Nevada. So I was in the car last year for like 12 hours. Yeah. So
Dude, driving 12 hours in a car on a road, comfortably is hard. Like,
for sure.
You didn't get out at all.
No. So there was one pit where we stopped and I swapped my navigators. So one got out to take a break, another one got in. And so that normally a stop would be like 15 to 30 seconds. But because a new co-driver got in, I think I had a minute and 30 seconds.
Did you poop? Like,
no. So that's the funniest part. So everyone asks that because you do endurance racing, you're in the car.
Yeah.
So, and so no, I didn't even get out of the car at that point, but I stood out the window so I could stretch my legs for a minute. But for like literally a minute. But so to go to the bathroom, so you be careful about what you eat the day before, because pooping is just not an option. Like you just can't do it. And if you do, you're going to poop your pants. Like you can't stop. Luckily I've never had that experience, but we all wear catheters. And so we actually go pee in the car. And so, like, you know, that race, I probably peed like 10 times. I don't know
why the concept of like having a catheter hooked up to you while racing through the desert. For some reason, it's like, isn't that like...
It's barbaric.
Doesn't that hurt?
No, so it's a little different than like your catheter that you'd wear at, you know, in the hospital. Like, so there's a condom catheter, so it goes over. So it's not as uncomfortable. Okay.
Wow.
So you wear that, but you have to be careful because the you know, you run the little like line down your leg and it comes out and you literally just pee out onto the floor. And then the car gets washed after and there's just so much dust and debris and everything. It just kind of like washes itself out.
Oh my goodness.
It's pretty nuts, but like you have to be careful because if you accidentally step or catch that line on anything, it'll just pull it off through your pants and you just pee your pants anyway. So that's only happened to me once, fortunately.
Yeah, well, it's peeing your pants. I mean, come on, we've all peed.
It's fine, right? Peeing your pants is cool.
Yeah, what is that? Billy Madison.
Yeah, Billy Madison.
Billy Madison.
That is funny, but yeah, so it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's very different than, you know, the road racing that you see at like a, you know, a road track. Like, you know, you mentioned that you ride street bikes, right? Yeah. It's still fun to do, but it's different. There you do a lap in 2 minutes, you know, and for us, you know, we're racing all day long. So anyway, so basically what I was telling you is that, like, so we have volunteers that go in what is called a chase truck. And so when we take off the line, there's chase teams in a truck loaded with fuel, parts, equipment, that will go and beat us to the next location. And then we'll set up a remote pit where we meet them. And then they'll take off to the next one when we leave there. And so they sort of leapfrog each other. So it takes quite a few people.
Is the barrier to entry to get into that type of racing pretty steep?
Yes and no. I mean, it's hard to say because, like, you know, we drive professionally, right? You do have to qualify. But qualifying is not too difficult if you have some experience. But honestly, time and money, I would say, is like the biggest qualification. Like, can you take the time to learn all of this stuff? And it's not cheap, right? Like, it, you know,
give us an idea. Like what would it cost to like maintain your race team for a year?
I think it depends on how much you race. But races can be anywhere from, on the cheap end for local race, like 10,000 a race, to as much as 50 or 60,000 a race, depending on where you're going. Yeah.
So if you get sponsors
hotels,
and things
food,
like that, then it can offset those costs? Is that
yeah, it can offset the costs. It just kind of depends on how much support you get. Like the biggest factory drivers obviously get the most support, but even for the big factory drivers, they're still being subsidized because when you're running at that competitive of a program, you're spending even more money. Yeah. So I would say most drivers have actually been entrepreneurs or are the family of, you know, really successful entrepreneurs at some point. So it's kind of fun.
You must have to be like in great shape to do that, right? Because I mean, is that your take? Are most of the people that you're racing with like great athletes?
You know, it's really funny because the off-road community is kind of like, you look at them and they're kind of like, I don't know what I call them. They're kind of the rough around the edges sloppy group. Yeah. They're like, You know, like the road racing drivers are like really precise, and they're the guys out riding bicycles in the street conditioning, you know, and like the off-road guys are like, just send it, you know? Yeah. So I think that there are some that really treat it like, as traditional athletes, there for sure are. I try to be more careful about what I'm eating and doing the week before a race. But I actually spend a lot of my free time working in the shop, and I love it. And so that's kind of my form of working out, like moving, lifting, doing things. Like in all of this, I learned how to weld, I learned how to fabricate, I learned how to be a mechanic, all that. And so that's kind of my form. But, you know, so we be careful about what we're eating. And then the night before the race or the morning of the race, we take IVs. So that really helps too, you know, to hydrate you and get the right nutrients in.
Really cool. So you and I met through a mutual friend that used to work with you at your first company.
Yeah.
I think it was your first company, Jump Software.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to start Jump Software, and, you know, maybe share a little bit about how you ultimately launched that company and how that company went?
Yeah, like how far back should we go?
As far as you want. As far as you want, baby.
So I'll give you yeah, I'll try to Reader's Digest it. And if you have questions, you know, feel free to interrupt me. But my dad was a small business owner, and I saw that, and then I saw kind of the negative parts about it. So I didn't really appreciate the good parts about it, but I saw the feast and famine, and I was like, that seems stressful. I don't want to do that. So I want to go to law school, right? Like I want to go study, you know, I was studying philosophy at BYU in my undergrad, and I was sure I wanted to be a lawyer, right? Like that's the career path I want. That's where money is. That's where stability is. And of course there was a lot I didn't know. So as I do everything, like, you know, how I do one thing is how I kind of do everything, right? So I do it like really intense. So, you know, unlike probably most law students, I go and I start like interviewing lawyers. And so I met with like 10 lawyers over the course of maybe 6 months. And I started seeing a pattern. That like, they didn't like what they were doing. Most of them were unhappy. There were, of the 10, there were 2 that stood out. 2 of them were happy, of the 2. One of them was this, I remember her. I don't remember her name. I don't remember what her firm was, but I remember she was really pretty, and she was very well spoken, and she was like a ball busting attorney representing women in divorces. And she was just like so good at her job. You could just tell she just killed it and loved helping her clients. She was unique. So I remember she stood out. She was happy. And then the final person that I met with, I'll never forget, he owned a few local businesses. So I don't know his name, but I do remember some of the businesses that he shared. And he got up and he starts telling his story. And after about 5 minutes, he shared, yeah, so, you know, I stopped practicing law and I started just buying businesses. And I was like, so this guy's super happy coming to talk about going to law school, and he's not even a lawyer.
Practicing law. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, so I'm like, there's some pattern here. So anyway, within, you know, I was like, so I'm, you know, taking the LSAT prep course. I'm a couple weeks from taking the LSAT, been thinking and stewing. And I was in my prep course, and literally, I like everyone's heads went down as the class started, because you take a practice test every week, and everyone's taking this test, and I'm just staring at a wall with my book closed for like 20 minutes, just thinking like, what am I doing? This isn't me. This isn't what I want to do. And it's like a movie. I like closed my book, packed up my bag, and everyone can hear me. And like, I just start head out the door, and like everyone's heads look up like, who's that crazy idiot? And why is he taking his test? You know? So I literally went home and then told my wife, like, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. That was an interesting conversation. So anyway, I, you know, within a few months after that, teamed up with a cousin of mine in California. So we were in Utah at the time. Teamed up with a cousin in California for a business idea he had. And we moved to California and started that first business. It was called Scout. And Scout was really like a digital marketing agency with a little bit of software. We built this dashboard to do automated reporting and things like that. But that was really kind of masking a service. And so we built that we got to about 3.5 million of ARR. And then and over about 3.5 years. And I really wanted to go build software, like a true vertical SaaS company. And I just felt like there was a huge opportunity, and that ended up becoming what was Jump. And so the idea for Jump was to essentially SaaSify this, service offering that we were doing at the previous company. And so anyway, I sold my shares out of that first company to my partners, and then used that capital to get Jump started. And basically what it was a customer engagement platform. And so we started out building listing management and review generation, and then review responses. And then that turned into kind of a text messaging platform. And that was a blast. I learned so much in that company, hired so many great people. It was awesome. It was absolute, it was so cool. I don't know how else to put it.
Did you bootstrap that from start to finish?
So technically I funded it initially with using a lot of the money that we started with the first company, Scout. So technically I was bootstrapped, and then for the first year, and then so like seed, pre-seed, seed sort of stage. Yep. And then we brought in a little bit of debt to get kind of through that first period. And then 1.5 years in, we raised a Series A. So total, we raised about $10 million for that company before we sold it. Yeah. Nice. So we got to 80 people. And then we had about 6.5 million of revenue, of ARR.
Amazing. Yeah. And who'd you exit to?
So we sold to a small kind of boutique private equity group. On paper, it was called Social Mecca, and they rounded up I think it was 8 or 9 companies total. And then literally 9 months after the acquisition, they sold to Reputation.com. So So Reputation.com currently has our customers and company.
Yeah. Smart. That's a good play.
Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah. How long did it take you from the time that you founded the company to the time that you sold?
So we sold, I think we're 1 month shy of 3 years.
Amazing.
It was fast.
Yeah.
It was fast.
That was similar to ours was.
Yours was quick too, huh?
January 19, 20, 21. A little shy. 29 months, I think, is the math.
Yeah. That's quick too. Months, that's quick. Like that. Yeah. It's like whoever's listening to this, right? The listeners are like, man, I can do the same. But it's not normal. It's like, I would say 5 years is a little bit more normal. 5, 6, 7 years.
5 years. Yeah. 5 years is pretty normal. Right. Unless you're either, just scaling the company to being really big, or obviously if you want to take the company public, then that timeline is typically a little bit longer. So with Jump, I think outsider looking in, people would say, man, that was easy. You put a little bit of money in, you went and built it, you raised 10 million, you exited, cool, overnight success guy. Right. Yeah. But what's the truth? How difficult really was it to do that? Do you have a day in mind where you woke up and you were just killing it? Everything was fine. And by the end of that day, you were down in the dumps, lowest plateau. And can you describe what that was like?
Yeah, it still happens. I mean, even if you're an investor, you make money, you lose money, by the hour. Yeah. I mean, look, if you can't handle a butterflies in your stomach, or a pit in your stomach that won't quit. If you can't handle that, try something else, because you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. You have to be able to stomach just how difficult it can be. I mean, you are facing rejection from your own employees, from sometimes the media, social media. You're facing it from your own customer base, from prospects, from investors, the general public, and worst, your own family. Most often, the people nearest to you are the ones who question you the most, right? Because they love you. But, it still sucks. So it's just, yeah, like you have to be able to stomach that. So, you know, back to your question of like, is there one particular time? I mean, the one particular time is like every other day over like 3-year period, you know, but there was a one particular time that comes to mind, that I've shared with people a few times. I think I've only shared it one other time, like actually recorded, but, there was a time in building, it was right when I was starting Jump. Now you have to understand, my first company, Scout, I was the young co-founder. Like I was the one learning from my cousin. And so not all of the pressure was on me. A lot of it was, but not all of it. And so, now this time Jump, all of it was on me. We ate what we killed, right? And no one was going to come rescue me. And so there was just a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And maybe 6 months in, you know, like we were burning money. It was getting intense. We just had more and more people we were hiring. It was daunting. And we hit like our first like steady lull in sales, and we sold a lot. We grew fast, but you know, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to perform. You expect to perform, but sometimes you don't. And that's the thing you just have to keep in mind. So there was a time we were in a lull, and I started getting like really anxious, scared, like straight up scared, super doubtful, and more than just like an hour of doubt, right? And then something good happens, you come out of it. That's what it is most of the time. This was like maybe sustained for a few weeks. And it just looked dismal. It looked like just maybe we weren't going to make it. And for the first time ever, I remember I was sitting on my couch at home, and I opened up my laptop and I Googled jobs in my area for the first time in years. Like, you know, it had been like 4.5 years, maybe 5 years since I had quit school and I decided to be an entrepreneur. And I'll never forget that. I spent like an hour looking up jobs, closed my laptop. Obviously I didn't want to do that, but was thinking about it, like what would it look like if I failed, you know? And anyway, later that night, I'm like, you know, sitting or laying in bed. Me and my wife were laying in bed and just kind of talking a little bit. And I said to her out of nowhere, I said, "Would you be disappointed in me if I failed?" And right away she said, "No, but I would be disappointed in you if you quit." And it just like hit me so hard. Like I woke up that next day with a fire like I had never felt before, you know? And that was a time I remember where like it maybe felt so bad that I considered throwing in the towel, you know? And I don't know if I would have, but like thank goodness for my wife to kind of kick me in the butt when I needed it.
That's pretty profound, actually. I mean, it seems simple, but for your spouse to say that, right? Like, I thought what you were going to say is something like, she just said, "No, I'd still love you." And it's like,
I'll be here for you.
She actually gave you something very profound. I love that message. And I think it's really important for people who are listening. Like, no matter what you're going to do, it's going to be hard. If it's worthwhile, it's going to be hard, really hard. And when you're thinking about throwing in the towel, those are the moments that like define you. It's like, I'm ready to quit, but I'm not going to. And it might be like the wrong decision, but I'm not going to quit. I'm not a quitter. Something else is going to have to take me out, right? Like, we had some moments in our company, several, where it was like, this thing might not work. Right. It might die. But it was like, we just kept going. And eventually we were around enough through some of these cycles, and we just persisted, and eventually good things happen, right? Yeah. Just by keep going.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, just like, it's funny. I think it's important for people to understand like the meaning behind failure too, because a lot of times people, because they haven't done it and they haven't been in the situation, they think about failure in the sense of an event. Like, I failed at something. And that's not usually how that works. Like, so let's say we start a company, like tomorrow, me and you start a company, and, you know, we create a product based on certain assumptions, right? That we believe that there's a problem that we're going out to solve. And it's very likely that in a month, it's very clear that we were wrong. The assumptions that we made about this product were maybe wrong. That's a failure, right? Maybe. And so how do we resolve that? We just pivot. We say, okay, well, that didn't work. Well, maybe there's this other variation of the problem that needs to be solved. And so it's not like this massive event of failure. It's like these constant things along the way. So you put together a good team and a good idea, and you are focused on your outcome of creating a company to solve a problem, you'll get there. Some of the best companies ever pivoted, and not even in such a dramatic sense, just literally just figured it out along the way, because you're going to be wrong sometimes. And that's the thing. I think the times where I have felt so stressed or so anxious in growing a company, it's when you hit that wall and you're like, dang it, we might've been wrong about this, and then how do you resolve it? You just make an adjustment.
I have this thing that I spend a lot of time with the CEOs that I coach on, which is called the energy audit and zone of genius. And the simple idea is, I believe that CEOs that have more energy by doing things they're great at, that they also love to do, it's called your zone of genius, tend to operate at a higher level and have better outcomes than CEOs that don't. Okay.
Is that within a work environment or in any environment?
It could be in any, right? But we're typically focused on within the bounds of your work walls, right? I want to ask you about your zone of genius. What are the things that you as a leader, as a CEO, love to do, but that you're also uniquely qualified to do or great at doing that bring you energy?
I get really energized working on product. I really enjoy my conversations with the engineers, and I love exploring how to solve small and impactful problems using the product. So I really enjoy that. I also really enjoy meeting with people and talking to customers. So sales is essentially it's not laborious to me to go meet with somebody and talk to them about the product. I love doing that, whether they buy or not. Because either way I'm learning, and then that helps me in turn on the product side. So I feel good at that. On the converse, where I feel like I'm weak in operations. I know what it should look like, but I'm not the person to make it more efficient. I need team members for that. I don't enjoy marketing, but I do it. I definitely don't enjoy it. So that's an interesting thing, but I'm learning that.
That's good, right? I think as CEOs, we tend to think that we have to, once you're doing your second one, you learn a lot of these lessons, but on your first one, you're like, well, no, I have to do everything. I have to be involved in everything. Right. I have to make decisions on everything. And it's once you realize that you should just focus on doing things you're good at doing, that you love to do, that bring you energy, and you let other people also do those things. Yep. So you hate doing operations, but if you give your operational tasks to somebody else that hates doing it, that's not good at it,
terrible.
It's just it's a recipe for disaster. But if you can find somebody who does love it and they're great at it, then you can make a lot of these things zone of genius across the company. That's when the magic happens. You're wearing this cool hat. For those who aren't watching but listening, that says DISTRO on it. What is that?
I have to check what hat I'm wearing.
Let's talk about
Sometimes I'm wearing my Ingram racing hat. DISTRO. I'll give you a little bit of context and background. So after we sold Jump towards the end of 2019 and, took some time off, and then the pandemic happened. In earlier 2020. And I was kind of just out of the loop for a year. And towards the end of 2020 is when I started racing. But for a while, I wasn't really doing anything. And in some sense, it was great. It was great to be with my family and spend time. But I still kept in touch with some of my friends, in my network that, are entrepreneurs themselves and trying to grow tech companies. And I just started seeing this really consistent pattern and issue. And that married with the fact that I was for sure bored. Like I wasn't getting up every day with like this fire. Like I was happy to be with my family, but I just was like, man, I am really wasting things I've learned and things I'm doing. So anyway, but to talk about the problem and what distro is. So distro is helping companies solve a problem of that, finding and retaining good quality technical talent. So it's really difficult when you're a CEO, a CTO, and any technical leader, and you're trying to grow your company. It is so hard to find somebody to work for you at a reasonable rate. So when you can't find a software engineer, like let's say a senior software engineer, you really have two options. The first option is that you pay this engineer an insane amount of money. We're talking like a lot of senior engineers are making $300,000 a year bases, and they've been working for 7 years in their career. It's like insane. Yep. So you issue out, a good pay raise, and then they still leave and go to the next company, for even more money. So the second option is that you hire, a dev shop, basically, an outsourced, service-based, development firm in another country that's cheaper. And, CTOs kind of feel like that's failure. Like they couldn't, harbor a good team. They couldn't create a good team. They feel like there's some layer between, their leadership and the people actually writing code. And so it's kind of a problem. And the people working on those projects at dev shops, the software engineers, they're just like, there's a layer between them and account managers. They can't be creative about what they want to build. And so anyways, I started rounding out a team in, I would say really late summer, early fall of 2021. I put a team together with Jake Toulson running as CTO, and Andrew Mackey, who worked with me at Jump, also coming in to help us to run operations and sales. And we rounded out a team, and we said, what can we do to solve this problem? Like, what options are there? And so we thought, what if we could just create an app that essentially removes the layer of what is a dev shop or the dev shop model? Like, we know there's good people around the globe, and we know there's good companies that want those people. And all we want to do is remove this business layer between them. So we want to make it so that technical leaders can manage their own people in other countries. So how do we do that? So we created a web app and a marketplace that essentially lets companies find, hire, and pay full-time team members around the globe for full-time work. So think like a similar structure to like a Fiverr or Upwork, but for full-time people. Full-time. Exactly. And so those interviewing are not interviewing for gig work. You're actually doing full-blown team interviews and peer interviews and technical interviews until you get to a point where you actually make an offer to hire them. And the way Distro makes money is that we bake our fee into every payroll run every month. And, payroll is automated regardless of what country you're going to. And Distro's platform does issues payments to over 200 countries. So it creates a big pull to hire.
That's serious. We had employees in the U.S. and Canada. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I felt stressed out all the time about employment law, tax law. So, and we wanted to hire full-time people, and we had developers in Serbia and in the Philippines and other areas, and we wanted some of these people to be full-time. We realized this doesn't make sense because there's so much we don't know. We're going to have to hire this firm that's going to take it, right? So how do you address that?
Yeah, so we make it pretty simple. When we started out, the product, we started surveying and interviewing a ton of people. Like we got on a ton of Zoom, interviews, and just literally we're talking to people around the globe. Because we were under the assumption that everybody wanted to actually have employment status in other countries. And what we found was that the candidates, so the companies were making an assumption based, like American tech companies, were making an assumption that just like the US, everyone else around the globe, it was better for them to be a W-2 or the similar version in another country to be a W-2 employee. And what we found was that that was just an assumption that's wrong by US based companies, and that candidates or users around the globe that wanted to be hired through Distro, they didn't want to be employees. That it was better for them to have a little bit more free structure that way. And a lot of them are making more money that way. So again, similar to like, Fiverr, Upwork, and other marketplace platforms where they're simply paid as contractors. So the way that we protect our customers is we create a layer of insulation and indemnification, with the agreements that we use when somebody gets hired through the app. But we've simplified it. And so a lot of like the tax law and some of these crazy laws in all of these varying countries, we bypass that through contractor relationships. The difference is that they're full-time roles. And so anybody joining is joining on a full-time basis. And then anybody joining Distro is usually getting hired through Distro is usually getting 20 to 30% raise from what they're making currently. So it's really a win for them. And then our customers are often saving 20 to 30%, sometimes more.
So how do you, not to get too detailed in this, but if these are technically contractors, there are certain laws in place to protect contractors that say things like, if you're a contractor,
sure,
you technically don't report to somebody. You technically don't have to do exactly what they say.
Right.
Is there something in your contract that's able to bind them?
Yeah, exactly. So they basically commit to that. Now it's funny, so you're making the same assumption that most of us do here leading the US, right?
Yeah.
And that's because we know our law here. And so in many other countries, it's inapplicable.
Okay.
Right. So, so it is kind of interesting, but we have all of the agreements set up to make it and protect our customers. And we have huge customers that we've gone through due diligence with them, like customers with well over $1 billion in revenue, So it's been interesting, learning, right? The more data we get, the more user experience we learn from. Yeah. We learn what works and doesn't work. And right now it's working.
Where's the company at today?
So we're at about 3.3 million of GMV, and it's or ARR, depending on how the accountant looks at it, and growing quickly. So we came up with the idea and started writing code in late 2021. So November, December. And we built an MVP that was value driven enough to get started in early 2022. And so we started selling in April of 2022, having customer meetings. And we recognized our first batch of revenue in June of last year. And so it's been 9-10 months. And we've grown that quick in 9-10 months.
And what do you want to do with this thing? Are you planning on taking on institutional money? Do you want to just make this thing profitable? Is it a lifestyle business? Are you going to sell it?
Yeah, definitely not a lifestyle business. Lifestyle businesses for me are too boring. It's like when you start producing profits and stuff, and you start buying more toys, and you're like, all right, what do I do now? I'm very much motivated. I would say our team is very much motivated by an amazing event for everybody, right? Yeah. And maybe that's money, maybe it's an acquisition, but certainly we're preparing, to be acquirable if it makes sense, and at what point. I think we're open to going 7 years, 8 years if we need to, but we'll see what happens in the next 3 to 4 years, as fast as we're growing, but certainly, with my background, we're going to build and prep to be able to do that.
Yeah. There's you talked a little bit about Jake and Andrew. Mm-hmm. These are the two co-founders.
Yeah.
Are they both co-founders?
Yeah, both co-founders with me.
How did you, obviously you had some experience with Andrew before, but how did you, for those listening, select your co-founders? And what does that early planning stage look like when the three of you come together and you start ideating on this product?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's hard. It's an art, not a science, I think. So last time I didn't have a co-founder and I regretted it. Last time, and because when it got hard, back you were talking how difficult it is. There's times when you just want to call and complain to somebody. You can't. There's nobody, right? You can't call your investors. You can't complain to your investors, and no one else gets it. It's so like refined, like nobody else gets it. And so I really, you can go to your therapist and your therapist doesn't even appreciate and understand like how crappy it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, oh, poor you, CEO, you're having a stressful day.
That's why, just a little plug. That's why CEO coaches are so
is how they're great. That's why they're great.
Half therapist, half like, I get it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, choosing the co-founders, I knew I wanted co-founders. I for sure knew that we couldn't solve this problem without a good CTO. I'm more than familiar with being able to hire really good technical leaders, and I totally could have just hired a CTO that, no equity. But I knew that we were going out and creating a product for tech leaders to be able to use. I knew we needed a good representative on our team. Yeah. And so Jake, so I actually approached Jake, who I knew, he's actually in my neighborhood, and really successful tech leader was at a funded San Francisco based, SaaS company, a big one. And he's like, I can think of some names. And then I remember he said, don't post that on LinkedIn or anything. Let me look at it. I might be interested. And so, a couple weeks later he committed. Andrew, I had known him already from my previous company, who was running our sales organization. And, I knew his value. He gets stuff done. Like that dude does not miss appointments. He does not miss commitments. He gets stuff done better than anybody. And so I knew that he would help me where I'm weak, right? I'm kind of like the visionary and forget stuff. And, like I need somebody to keep me true. And then Brittany also works on our team. She's not a co-founder, but she's worked with me in the last 3 companies in finance. And so she was an obvious, easy answer to say, also come and join. And given that we were doing a lot of financial things in the business and our product, it made a lot of sense to have her come back also. And so that was the first core team. And then we've hired a few people since then.
Amazing. Sounds like things are off to a blistering start. How much of your time do you spend on this company now? Like, if you're like me and a lot of first-time founders, you just kill yourself on the first one. Like, are you killing yourself on this one?
I think I'm better about it now. It's hard to go from not doing it's hard to go from doing everything to then doing nothing after selling and then going back into doing everything again, like building spreadsheets and all that. In fact, I made a post on LinkedIn yesterday, I think it was, and which was, nobody's going to do it for you. Go do it. Like I had this thought the other day, like nobody's just going to do it for you. So you just need to do it. So that's hard. Now, as far as like how I'm balancing it, I'm doing a lot better at saying no to certain things, knowing what's valuable for my time and what's not. Yep. Whereas before I literally would say yes to literally everything because any shot that help us be successful is great. So, the first 6 months of building the company, I was probably working like maybe 30 hours a week just because there's only so much you can do when you don't have a lot of customers. Now, full blown working all the time, like 40, 50 hour weeks again. And 40 compared to like 60, 70, 80 before is much better, I think.
Totally.
So
I want to wrap with one final question, which I like to ask founders is, there's a lot of aspiring founders that want to start a company. Maybe they have an idea, maybe they don't, but they know they want to do it. What's your number one piece of advice that you would share for those who are thinking about starting a company?
Yeah, like I could talk for hours about this. And I think I've probably given people different points of advice depending on the context. But I think the thing I've said most consistently over the years to people that have asked me that question is spending money. So many people have ideas, right? And ideas, until they're sellable or you're doing something with it, is valueless. Like, I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but you have to be able to do something. And most people are too afraid to do anything. And so I believe, maybe I'm wrong for some people, but I believe when you start spending money, doesn't even have to be a lot, but when you start spending money, there's something inside of you that feels like you should get moving on something. Like maybe for some, it's as simple as building a website and paying somebody to do it, yep. $500, yep. Right? Maybe for others, it's buying a domain, $1,000, depending on what it is. Whatever it is, actually paying somebody to build a product for you, like spend money. It sounds crazy. And what are you going to lose? A couple $1,000? Like, wait till you actually have a full-blown company. You'll lose way more than money than that, right? So like, get ready, So that's what I tell people, go spend money. And, for me, this kind of happened recently because with Distro, it was still an idea. We just started coding. We were a ways away from even being able to sell. And you know what I did? I freaking signed an office lease. What's that going to do? That's going to make it so I don't treat this casually.
Yep.
Just go for it, spend money, and you will figure out a way to pay for everything.
And you probably put a personal guarantee on it if I had to guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It was amazing to have you on. I really appreciate the time and the lessons that you shared with us today. So thank you.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Really excited to have Chad Ingram on today, and grateful that he spent the time with us and shared some of his wisdom. The three things that I took away from this episode today are: number one, how you do one thing is how you should do everything. I love this lesson. I think it's all about consistency. It's about making sure that you're never half-assing anything. And I think specifically if you want to build a great company, this is a must. Number two, nobody's going to do it for you, right? You have to step up to the plate. You have to be willing to put in the effort. You have to be willing to put in the time. Things don't just happen. Massive results require massive action. So you got to do it. Number three, if you want to get into something and you want to be a successful founder, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. Doesn't mean everything's going to work up front, but you have to spend the money. Spending that money will force you to start. It'll force you to be pulled in and to start doing it. And then lastly, I love Chad's message about quitting and what his wife told him. It's just not an option. And so if you're going to start something, see it through. Don't quit. Nobody's ever built something successful by quitting and giving up. That's a wrap for this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Thank you for joining. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.